so much of society really applauds and lauds folks who specialize to the max, who really go above and beyond. But I think a lot gets lost when we don't also laud and applaud people who have really good balance and who have established a really good homeostasis, that they're able to be adaptive to different situations, that they are able to manage a variety of different life domains, relationship, work, family life, friends, etc. That's a success too. And if we can allow for different definitions of success, I think it can tune down the pressure significantly.
Do you ever feel like you're constantly measuring yourself against other people, but you just can't keep up? In this episode, I chat with Dr. Adam Formal about comparison, burnout, and how to rebuild your identity when life changes. Adam's a clinical psychologist who's worked with Olympic athletes, high performers, and people navigating major transitions, helping them to find balance, purpose, and a way forward that actually lasts. Welcome to Move Your Mind, where we uncover why you are holding yourself back from getting the life you want and what to do about it. With the help from high-achieving guests and experts in behavioural science, personal development, and the health and wellness space. Join us if you're ready to move out of your own way toward your ideal self. I'm your host, nickbracks, and I've been working in the health and wellness space for the last 15 years, helping people find direction and gain the courage to take control of their life. My mission is simple: to help you learn everything that I wish I knew, so you can become your ideal self. Lacking guidance, I spent the majority of my youth feeling lost and disempowered, which led to depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and substance abuse. Looking back, I didn't have the vocabulary to communicate what I was experiencing. And as a man, I didn't resonate with the emotional language used in traditional therapy. I didn't need to talk about my feelings. I needed tangible solutions to guide me toward building a life I was proud of. If you can relate, then this podcast is for you. In this episode, we discuss how to stop comparison and rebuild your identity. If you're ready to take action and build a stronger mindset, then keep listening. Adam, so nice to meet you, mate. Thank you for making the time to come on the podcast.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure.
Great to have you here. So I'm just going to jump straight in and ask if you can give us a background on yourself, the work you're doing, how you came to be, where you are now.
Okay. Yeah.
Big question.
Absolutely. So I am a licensed clinical psychologist and a credentialed alcohol and substance use counselor. And my training started mostly working in hospital settings, acute inpatient psychiatric units. Those are locked-in units where people are there against their will, where I learned about the sort of how acute, how far down the rabbit hole one can go. And then I also worked in a variety of other treatment settings, outpatient HIV clinic, college counseling center. And I ended up focusing on work in dual diagnosis, so mental health and substance use. And I did a lot of extra training in that just to better understand the relationship between mental health and substance use, because they really do go hand in hand. And then I moved on to a group outpatient psychotherapy clinic. And then I formed my own in June of last year. And right now I focus on people, really high performing people, elite athletes, mostly Olympians and Paralympians, present and former. And people struggling with substance use, how they manage to cope when they've really cultivated themselves in certain ways, and then they find that their life is a little imbalanced as a result. And so I try to help them establish a little bit more balance or homeostasis going forward.
I love it. Well, I love what you're doing, mate. And I think there's so much that you've done and, so much education in there, so many areas that you're helping in. I think we probably need to do about 10 different podcast interviews to cover each area. But, the addiction side's so interesting as well, and the substance abuse that you're talking about, because it really is, so related to the mental health side, using it as a coping mechanism to mask what's going on underneath. And I think so many of us in society, even if I just look at in Australia, I think similar in the US, with binge drinking. It's such a cultural thing. People do it every week. How many of those people are doing it to mask a problem? That's what I was doing. That's what I've known so many people that are doing it that way, but so many of us don't really admit to ourselves or realize that it is a problem.
Absolutely. I think that the way I try to think about it is that I try not to put addiction in a different category than any other forms of coping, that there are adaptive uses and maladaptive uses for any coping strategy. So for instance, if I break my arm and I'm in a lot of pain, a pain medication is a really adaptive strategy to help me continue along with my day, to help me function in all of the other ways I want to function. Whereas if I have to take a test, for instance, and I'm procrastinating from taking a test, that would be a maladaptive coping strategy. But both are a form of avoiding, right? So I'm avoiding the pain with the broken arm, and I'm avoiding worrying about the test in the latter. But one is adaptive where one is maladaptive. And so what I try to think about is, where is it more adaptive than maladaptive? Where are the ways in which it's beneficial as opposed to more beneficial than harmful than the reverse? And so that can be video games, that can be social media, that can be anything else. That there are times in which it can be helpful, and there are times in which it can be really harmful for us.
Yeah, and I mean, social media, that's a whole nother topic in itself, where these things are becoming so ingrained in life. How do you sort of, I mean, a big part of what I'm trying to do with my company, with Move Your Mind, is really, it's on the holistic side. I'm not a psychologist. It's more trying to, we empower individuals to become a leader in their own, personal behaviors daily, and do holistic things, have the discipline to exercise, eat well, to, make sure you're focusing on the right things. Because if we don't take ownership ourselves, like, how do we do it when society's putting so much in front of us?
That is a great question, and also such a worthwhile goal. I think about with your goal, I think about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The basics is, sleeping, eating, all of those things that are so important as a foundation for everything else that we do. But to your other point about how do we kind of have the discipline, how do we focus on the right things? I think a big part of it is really kind of putting our finger and identifying the problem in the first place. That if we are not mindful about what we are doing in any moment, then I think we're operating sort of reactively as opposed to proactively making choices. I think it was Socrates that said something like the life unexamined is not worth living. And what I took that to mean really is that if we're not reflecting on our choices, we're not making choices. We're just kind of going along with a pre-existing program. And so what it means to actually reflect on your choices is to say, I am intentionally doing this as opposed to that, or I am intentionally not doing that. And so I think the more we can label what it is that we want to do, and seeing the degree to which our actions are in alignment with or not in alignment with what we want to do our goals, then I think it gives us a really good buffer from some of these external messages that make it hard to really be clear on where we want to be.
And how important do you think it is that we have help in that process, whether it's someone like yourself, having a professional, I know for me, I've worked with so many professionals, and that's really helped. When I've met my current partner, so many things have now been reflected at me through that relationship. She's in the area of neuroscience and psychology, and would call me out on, negative behaviors I would have. And even when you're hearing it, you deny it. And then eventually you come around, and then you're so thankful at the end of it that, thank you for pointing it out. But even when someone's saying it to you, it can be so hard to confront it. Do you feel like we can't do this on our own? We need the support of other people or a professional, and etc.
Yeah, well, not necessarily a professional. I think that just the very nature of life is that it is so hard to be simultaneously a participant and an observer in your own life. And I think we need time to do both. That much of our life we're participating, but then we have to take these times to kind of step back and say, and observe and say, okay, where am I going here? Does this look right? Do I want to continue to move in this direction? And, sometimes that forced reflection can come from, a near-death experience or something serious that kind of shakes up our lives. But, we don't want to necessarily depend on something like that happening in order to reflect. And so forced reflection through other people giving us feedback can be super helpful in kind of clarifying, what is the direction we're going? Are we happy with it? And where do we want to be?
Yeah, I love that. I love that, because otherwise, we can stay stuck if we don't make room for that, if we don't sort of prioritize that. And it is so easy, there's so many competing things going on. Like you're saying, it can be very easy just to stay in the status quo if we don't open ourselves up. So yeah, super important point. So you're talking about, you do a lot of work with high performers, athletes, etc. You were telling me before we started recording, you yourself were, playing table tennis. I think you were saying on the US team at a pretty high level. So it's a big area. Look at the mental health in the for athletes. How important is it, do you think, we're addressing that area? What are some things that come up?
Yeah, I think there are more things than we could talk about within the amount of time that we have. But I think one way in which I frame it is like looking at the things within a specific population, in this case athletes, that are unique or rare or true to just this population. And so the first thing I think about is how embodied it is, that an athlete is an athlete in part because of the way their body functions. And so what does that mean in terms of what kinds of issues can come up? So in certain sports, there is a weight limit. And so that will impact an athlete's relationship with their body. Or an athlete might feel pressure to look a certain way based off of their particular sport. Or that if they're in the public eye, people are going to be looking at them and commenting about what their body looks like. When they have injuries, what does that mean for them when they're not actively able to participate? If they find themselves, at the peak of performance and then an injury hits them, how do they identify during those times? What does it mean for them to recover from injury? And then when they retire, if they've been used to using their body in a certain way for so long, what does it mean for them to think about how they may want to use their body differently going forward? And so that's something that I try to help athletes with as well. So sometimes certain sports lead to imbalance in the way a body is developed. Let's take an archer, for instance, or a bowler, where one arm or one side of the body might be more developed than the other. How do they want to cultivate their body going forward? And those are things that we can think about. And then there are a whole host of other elements too. The life cycle of an athlete tends to be a lot shorter. Hopefully I can be a psychologist for another, 30, 40, 50, as long as I want, as long as my cognitive capacities hold. But with an athlete, some gymnasts retire by about 19 or 18. And so what does that mean in terms of how they define themselves if they've been so single-minded in their focus for so long, their entire life, and they don't know anything different? How do they transition from athlete to post-athlete life? And then what does that mean when you've been eating, sleeping, training, traveling a certain way for a sport, and then to not have that structure? How do you impose structure on your life? How do you come up with goals in light of not having coaches telling you what to do, having tournaments that you're going to, being motivated to eat or sleep or engage in certain ways? So there's just a plethora of different things involved with just what it means to be an athlete. And then there's all the messaging that comes along with it. Because in our societies, we often look at athletes as superhuman. And they're taught to fight through the pain, to push through and push the edge of their potential physically. But there are also so many messages that come underneath with that they're not allowed to have doubts. They're not allowed to feel weakness of any kind, both physiological or psychological. And so how do we leave room for an athlete to be a whole individual instead of a performing thing?
It's so interesting, yeah, and there really is so much in it. And like you're saying there, I guess when you finish, even if you reach the absolute top of whatever field you're in, it's not going to mean you're just okay automatically for the rest of your life. I mean, I interviewed Matthew Mitchum, who was an Australian gold medal winning diver in the Olympics, and he ended up having a huge drug ice addiction post his career, went into a deep depression, and this was after winning the gold medal. And, so he was really talking about how much of a struggle it's been and how he, couldn't find the right path after the career and just all the ins and outs that happened. And then, you look at someone like Michael Phelps, who the most decorated Olympian in history, who became suicidal after his career. And you think, how on earth could that happen? And it really highlights on such a public level the fact that, we live in this society where we're taught that if we just do more, acquire more, achieve more, then we'll finally be enough. And clearly it's not the answer. You're seeing it on such a level. Like, it really displays that for us.
There's so much to that. Yes. I think there's an element of like the dog catching the car, that, for many people, they work so hard for so long to achieve a certain goal. But if someone is achieving it in their 20s and they believe that or perceive that somehow to be their peak, then what do they have to live for after that? So I think there's that element to it that can sometimes come up for athletes. And then the other is around
If you're feeling stuck, you're not alone. Most people don't realize how connected your mental health is to your body, from your gut to your sleep, movement, food, mindset. Getting active each day can shift how you feel, build confidence, and transform your quality of life. At Move Your Mind, we guide you through this process step by step. If this resonates and you want to learn more, simply go to my Instagram at nickbracks and click the link on the bio to fill out an application, and I'll send you over more information about the program. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast. If you find the show helpful, please share it with a friend and follow me on Instagram. It really helps.
all of the goals that are put forth for them are so concrete, a medal, getting a better time, that in some ways achieving a goal like that is simple. With any sport, there are rules, there's structure, there's standards. It is a very objective goal. And when we're talking about well-being, when we're talking about wellness, when we're talking about vitality, there is no one formula. There is no one standard. There is no one objective goal that one needs to hit, and therefore they will be happy or content or well. And so I think it can be really disorienting for a lot of folks when stripped from these like objective standards where they're really applauded and lauded for, that they find themselves in this position where the goals aren't concrete, the goals aren't specific, the goals aren't objective, and then they have to figure that out, which is a whole nother issue entirely.
It's so interesting. And, I think about my own experience, and really the deepest probably mental health issues that I faced came from a similar thing where, my only goal I had until I was 18 was to be a professional athlete, and it's all I cared about. And I loved it. I loved competing. I still miss it to this day. But it's really, I built my whole identity on it. And when that ended, I just overtrained. I wanted to be a middle distance runner. I was playing AFL before that, and ended up having to stop because I had just run myself into the ground and had endless injuries because I was overtraining and overcompensating through it. And when that ended, I was continually looking for, what is it that I can do in life that's going to give me that same high? What's going to be as meaningful to me, as important? And everything went through that filter. And it meant that I almost dismissed everything as being meaningless because it didn't feel as extreme or as exciting as that. And I still, fight those thoughts to this day, where I can think, what's the point of this though? It's not going to be, it needs to be giving me that thrill. And I can only imagine how difficult it is when you've, been at that top level, you're getting that adrenaline rush, you've already experienced it, and now you're trying to work out, how do I just live day to day and adjust to normal life? And I think that structure, it's so interesting the way you framed it. That really makes so much sense, because it just gives you a framework to live your life in. And I was talking to my partner last night about a cult. And I guess a cult, a similar thing where people, it's like binary. It's like, this is the rules you live by. This is what's right. This is what's wrong. Okay, I don't have to think anymore. Great. This is giving me now just a path, to a filter to put everything through. But ultimately, it's probably not going to be sustainable or lead to a happy outcome. I just found that so interesting, what you're saying there.
Yeah, it reminds me of what you're saying. Reminds me of about cults. Reminds me of a patient that I worked with many years ago, and he said, "Adam, I don't envy you." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, and he didn't know about my life or what I do or outside of our work together, but he said, you probably have, some boyfriend or girlfriend somewhere, and you have your graduate school that you're working on, and you have, bills to pay and this and that. And he was, just kind of making up a picture. But what he came to was making the point, he goes, I don't envy you because my life is simple. All I need to do is figure out where I get the next high. And, about with cults, or with athletics, not to compare the two, but to say that, with certain frameworks that we have, it provides such a structure, and that structure can be really orienting, especially in the face of tremendous anxiety or self-doubt, that to have a set of rules to follow that governs what you do when you do it can really be very containing for a person and allow them to feel a little bit more okay with themselves. And to have that structure ripped away can just be frightening.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and that's where so much addiction comes from, I guess. Like, if I look at my own example, I started abusing alcohol because, again, it became simple. Okay, escape, abuse alcohol, gives me the high. That's my new formula. Obviously not sustainable. The thing that I'm finding interesting as we're talking about this with the sport example is you're learning through sport that this binary system is what you're literally getting the feedback that this gives me results. Then you go into normal day-to-day life and it becomes actually a disadvantage, because how can we have, a balanced life or be flexible? We're going to miss opportunities. If we're thinking so binary, well, what if something left of center comes up that could be the most meaningful thing we could ever do in our life and lead to God knows what? We're not going to do it if we're like thinking in that box. But it's a weird contradiction where on one level, that thinking can get you great results in life, and on another, it can be your downfall.
Absolutely. I think so much of society really applauds and lauds folks who specialize to the max, who really go above and beyond. But I think a lot gets lost when we don't also laud and applaud people who have really good balance and who have established a really good homeostasis, that they're able to be adaptive to different situations, that they don't that they are able to manage a variety of different life domains, relationship, work, family life, friends, etc. That's a success too. And if we can allow for different definitions of success, I think it can tune down the pressure significantly for a lot of people who are trying to focus on this very single-minded definition.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. I think that's the thing, isn't it? The definition of success, we're just taught it really, there shouldn't be any one definition. It's almost, we need to create for ourselves what we personally value as success and live by that
Mm-hmm.
rather than what society keeps telling us. How was it for you with your table tennis,
Mm-hmm.
made it to, a super high level? What happened with that? Did it come to an end at some point? Was it difficult to transition? Did you have similar things coming up for you through that endeavor? If you're feeling stuck, we get it. Most people don't realize how connected your mind is to your body. Sleep, gut health, food, exercise, it all matters. At Move Your Mind, we help you lose weight, build confidence, and reset your mindset in just 100 days. There's no extremes and no experience needed. We guide you to build simple habits and routines that will last for a lifetime. If this resonates and you want to learn more, simply go to my Instagram at nickbracks and click the link on the bio to fill out an application, and I'll send you over more information about the program. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. If you have any suggestions for new topics or guests, please send me a DM on Instagram at nickbracks.
Certain things I think were similar. I didn't make it to like the highest of high levels, so I made it to Maccabi USA team. But by no means did I like make it quite to pro. What happened with me was, I think when I was younger, it was the community, the table tennis community was a source of real, it was community for me. I was going to a school where I was not close in proximity to friends. And so I would find myself going to the table tennis club every night. And so that was a source of community for me. It was a place where I found pride in myself and what I was doing. And slowly over time, what happened, I think, is as I delved further into psychology, had some injuries as well, I noticed how the thing that allowed me to travel and play tournaments around the world, and the thing that, I derived so much self-worth and pride in, was suddenly holding me back because, either injuries or training as a sacrifice for spending time with friends or with others or doing other things that I wanted to do. And so as that kind of those pros and cons shifted for me, I was able to recognize, thankfully, that, the thing that was so good for me at one time, sort of outlived itself in certain ways. And then, between that and going to graduate school was sort of the final nail in the coffin, where I just didn't even have the time anymore.
Yeah, I think but what you're saying there, I think we need to learn from that, that ability to be able to look at things in that logical way and evaluate and see, okay, you know what, that this thing, and for anything, with like the athletes you're talking about, this has served me at this point in my life. Now it no longer serves me. What's the next thing that's going to lead to, and being adaptable like that? Because it's a difficult thing to do. We get attached to things. We get attached to an identity. We want to simplify it and be one thing, but having that ability to really evaluate what's good for us at different times in life, I think is so critical.
Yeah, I think you make such a great point. I think about identity and those things that are a little bit more immutable and changeable, like roles as a parent or a partner or a son, versus those of like any career, because if you are a gymnast or a tennis player and you get injured and you can't play anymore, do you call yourself like an ex-tennis player, an ex-gymnast, an ex-athlete, or do you bring some of that forward? But if you're only whatever you are in that moment, things change very quickly. And so I think the average person changes jobs, I believe it's 9 times from 19 to 39. And so does your identity change 9 times in, every 2 years or so because your job changes? Or are there things about you that are, a little bit more fixed, a little bit more almost eternal in nature that you can kind of hold on to in the face of all of these shifts, and allow yourself to say, well, just because this served me now, it doesn't mean it's going to continue to serve me well.
Exactly. How big of an issue would you say comparison is in the world? And I guess social media's made that a lot bigger. Again, I'll give you an example with myself. I'll give you an extreme
Sure.
one. I wanted to be, like I was saying, a professional athlete. My favorite sport to watch is tennis.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll watch it and I'll love it. I'll be watching, I used to love Rafael Nadal and I love Alcaraz
Me
now.
too.
Yeah, amazing to watch. But so I'll watch them and then I'll get really depressed afterwards and I'll think, what the fuck have I done with my life? This guy is my age and he's traveling the world playing tennis. He's getting a thrill. He's making all this money. Here I am just trying to do, I'm not making anywhere near that kind of money. I'm not getting to do exciting things. And then I'll almost dismiss. And then I have to catch myself. I'm like, what am I doing? But because I had that experience in sport, then automatically it'll just go to this extreme level. That's completely not logical, not thinking about, well, it's, this is 1 in 100 million people that make it there. They've trained their whole life, blah, blah, blah. But how many of us are getting affected by comparison, do you think, in the modern world?
Yeah, I think I'm sure a lot, and I'll give my at least sense as to why. I think there are these really positive elements to comparison, and then there's where comparison becomes the thief of joy. Comparison at its best is when we recognize something that someone else is doing, and we can see how we can do that ourselves. And so if we use that as a way to motivate ourselves, or we figure out a shortcut, for instance, to doing something, or a better way to do something that we already want to do, that's a wonderful thing. And we want to be able to learn from other people's, whether it be mistakes or journeys, as a way to help us on our own. In science, they talk about how we stand on the shoulders of giants. We use the previous information in order to better our situation. We don't start from scratch. And so that form of comparison, I think, is so healthy and so good and so adaptive and helps us to be the best version of ourselves. I think where comparison goes awry is sort of in the example that you gave, which is when we compare ourselves to another person, we are removing our own scale. So you might not be able to tell here, Nick, but I am all of 5'6". And so I am not going to compare how good of a center I would be in the NBA to Shaquille O'Neal, or Jokic, but for a more current example. But what I can do is I can say, compared to where I am now, what are the things I can do to be better? And so I can say, I can improve my free throw shooting percentage. I can improve my footwork. I can improve this, that, and the other thing. And so if we use our own barometers as a way to mark improvement, then I think we get out of that trap of comparing ourselves to other people, because we don't have the same situations growing up. Not everyone has, like Nadal has an uncle I think it was an uncle who was a professional soccer player who knew how to get into professional sport, or the financial resources that they did. Or how about another uncle who was a professional tennis player and coach himself, who knew how to drive his son, or such a supportive family. And so when we don't have those same starting conditions, whether it be height, something very apparent, or these other things that help really facilitate, it isn't a fair comparison to make in the first place. And so we do want to look at ourselves on our own scale, as opposed to judging ourselves on somebody else's.
Yeah, and great. And so it's really using logic and looking at even if we have made mistakes in the past, it's looking at, okay, this is where I'm at right now. Okay. And if we want to use it as a motivator, what can I do right now? What is in my power? And then I guess you don't really leave any room for anxiety, because you're just looking at, you're going to take action, and you're looking at what are the logical steps, and let's just not even think about things we can't control.
That's right. Yeah. One definition of depression that I like is the past impeding on the ability to be present. And one definition of anxiety that I like is the future is impeding on the ability to be present. And so what we get back to is just, what can we do here? What can we do now? How do we take one step in the direction that we're looking to take, and see where that collection of steps over time takes us. And we can always reassess and reevaluate as we do, but breaking it down to something simple and taking a few steps that feel like they're in the right direction can sometimes take us a very long way.
And I love that. As you know, I've heard that a few times in different ways, but I love what you're saying there. You know, depression coming from just ruminating on the past and anxiety from worrying about the future. If we can use that as a filter and try and evaluate when we are having these feelings come up, is it one of those two categories? If it is, what's the more practical thing I can do? It's a really simple way to try and just reframe, and, you know, a good mindfulness technique to change your mindset in those times. So really love that. That's a great example.
Thank you.
What would you say to a big portion of our audience are men, and a lot of them are people that are sort of in a transition, you know, they're feeling stuck maybe in the job they're in, maybe just feeling like there's got to be more to life. They're looking to make a big change, but they're scared to do it. They might have problems with addiction or behavioral problems. For anyone that's just feeling completely stuck, what would you say would be a first step they could take?
Okay. I'll give you a first and maybe a follow-up too. I think the first step would really be acknowledging it to yourself and really taking an accounting of your life and saying, what are the things that I like? What are the things that I don't like? And where you can really do that is through checking in with your gut. That, you know, where we find things that we really enjoy, if we're doing them, if we're engaging in them, at the end of the day, we might be tired, we might be physically exhausted, we might even be mentally exhausted, but we gain a sense of accomplishment or vitality or positive well-being as a result of doing what we're doing. You know, if someone really loves tennis and they're playing tennis, they might be totally exhausted at the end of the day, but they enjoy it and they feel good about it. And if they run into challenges or they can't beat a certain opponent, they might be more willing to persist and say, okay, what do I need to study? How do I learn in order to overcome this opponent, in order to improve my game? But if someone is not intrinsically motivated, if someone does not feel good about what they're doing, at the end of the day, they're going to feel burnt out. They're going to feel a lack of vitality. They're going to feel drained. They're going to feel poor well-being. They might find ways to kind of zone out. You know, whether that be fantasy novels, video games, social media, substance use, etc. And so being able to check in and saying, you know, what are the ways in which I'm tuning into the world? How can I do more of that? And what are the ways in which I'm really tuning out? And then just kind of put them in columns, you know, write it down and say, how do I shift more into this direction than that? One cannot live totally in a zone where you're tuned into everything. There's things that we do day to day that we don't like doing, but we feel we have to. But there's a difference between those things that, you know, between, you know, recognizing that you need both and not having enough of those things that really help you tune in, that make life really worth living. And so being able to really hone in on those things that we really enjoy doing, the things that make us feel alive in the first place. Because if we don't feel alive, it's hard to enjoy living. It's hard to live.
You start asking yourself, you know, what's the point? What's the point of doing this if we don't feel that? And yeah, and I think like with burnout, a lot of the time it can, in a simple form, feel like, okay, it's probably just because I'm doing too much. But exactly like you're saying, and if I look at times when I've felt really burnt out, it's been because I've felt stuck or I've been dissatisfied with what I'm doing. But when you are doing something you're passionate about, and like you're saying, obviously you can't, not every part of that is going to be enjoyable, but the bigger vision and what you're working towards is all consuming for you, and you almost feel re-energized as you're working. There's sort of no limit to, you know, how much you can do because you're loving what you're doing. You've got that passion. So it's important to, so important to like have the awareness to look at these things so we can understand what's going on.
Yeah. And even some people who are passionate about something, but they notice their passion waning in a certain way, that can be a really difficult time too, because what the well that you're drawing from so often, for so long and for so often, is drying up. And so how do you recognize, is this something I need to change within this pattern, or do I really need to look towards what's next? So a lot of like professional athletes will tell me, oh, the competition, no problem. I'm ready to play. It's training during the off season. That's the thing that got too hard for me to continue anymore. All the preparation for it. So it's the recognition that there are these like really fun, great things that make it worthwhile. And then there are these like, monotonous, burdensome, difficult things that we're willing to put up with in order to do this great stuff. And then, at some point, does it shift where those burdensome things outweigh the desire to do that fun, exciting, exhilarating stuff?
Yeah, that's super interesting. That's another great way to look at it. Does the negative outweigh the positive to really look at whether you need to make that change if you're stuck in anything. So love that. Love everything you're talking about here, mate. I think like I said, we probably need to do a round 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, lots of things to talk about. For any of our listeners, if they want to learn more about you, where can I send them?
Yeah. So either you can check me out on LinkedIn. My name is Adam Formal, and or you can go on my website, www.formaltherapy.com.
Easy. Well, we'll have the links in the show notes, so anyone listening, make sure to check them out. Adam, we finish every episode with 5 closing questions. These can be sort of like whatever answer comes to mind for you. First one is, what's your best childhood memory that comes to mind?
Oh, I feel like I'm in therapy now. Yeah, childhood memory. Maybe the first time I went to the beach. Yeah.
Love that. What do you think's currently the biggest burden on mental health in society? If you feel like you've lost control of your health, physically or mentally, Move Your Mind is here to help you. We guide you through weight loss, lifestyle change, and resetting your mindset without any extremes or overwhelm. If this resonates and you want to learn more, simply go to my Instagram at nickbracks and click the link on the bio to fill out an application, and I'll send you over more information about the program. Thank you for supporting the podcast. If you find this show helpful, please share it with a friend and follow me on Instagram. It really helps.
I think that there's a real push for there to be, for people to get services, but there's so many different professions and sub-professions and specialties. It's really hard to link provider to patient where there's a good therapeutic alliance. So research has shown that the number one predictor for therapy success is the relationship between therapist and patient. And it can be really hard to go out there, to try it out, and for it to not work, and just have the resilience to like keep looking until you find someone that really connects with you. And so I encourage people to be patient, to really try. And and there also needs to be a way to better match.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Such an important thing. What would you say is your personal definition of happiness?
I think that matches up with something that I talk about with patients often, which is at the end of the day, when everyone else is gone to sleep, you have to look at yourself in the mirror. I call it the mirror test. And you have to be okay with who you are. And so if more days than not, you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, I'm pretty happy with who I am. I'm okay with who I am. That's a pretty good standard.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's a really good test. I love that. What if you could give one piece of advice to your 18-year-old self, what would that be?
One piece of advice to my 18-year-old self. Just say yes to a lot. Don't be afraid to give things a shot. And if you like it, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks.
Great advice. Final one, what are you most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of, I think the work that I've put in on myself to just kind of understand who I am and feel comfortable with who I am.
Yeah, love that, mate. Love that. Well, I think there's a huge amount to be proud of from what you've shared here. And I've taken so much out of this. I'm sure our listeners will as well. So thank you for, I know you're busy, so thank you for making the time to come and share all of this. And yeah, we'll have to stay in touch.
Thank you for having me. It was a real pleasure, and I learned so much from you too.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Adam Formal, for joining me today and offering your insights. And thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode and any suggestions for topics you'd like to hear about. Feel free to leave a comment or just send me a DM. Your feedback is always appreciated. Please don't forget to click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram. It really makes a difference. Thank you so much.